Captain Jake Martinez stood on the bridge of his ship, watching the stars through the large window. His ship, the Horizon's Edge, was not built for war. It was made for exploring new worlds and helping people. Jake had been doing this job for 15 years, and he loved every day of it. The ship was quiet today. Most of his crew were resting or working on small tasks. Lieutenant Amy Foster was in her lab, studying samples from their last planet visit. She always got excited when she found new forms of life. Chief Engineer Ben Clark was fixing something in the engine room. He could fix anything, and other species often asked for his help when their machines broke down. Jake's people, the humans, had been part of the big galactic family for almost 200 years. Everyone knew humans as the nice ones. They were bigger and stronger than most other species, but they never used their strength to hurt others. When there were fights between different alien races, humans would step in to make peace. When natural disasters hit planets, humans were always the first to send help. The other alien races found this strange. The Velfani were an old and powerful empire. They had ruled parts of the galaxy for thousands of years. They thought strength should be used to control others. The Keth were very smart and had the best technology. They believed that only the smartest species deserved to live well. Both groups thought humans were too soft and kind to be dangerous. Jake remembered the last Federation Council meeting he attended. Elder Vexthal of the Velfani had patted him on the head like he was a child. "You humans are so sweet," the alien had said with a laugh. "Always trying to save everyone. It is good that someone does the gentle work while we handle the real decisions." The Keth representative had been even worse. "Humans are useful," she had said coldly. "They fix our machines and clean up our messes. But they lack the intelligence for true leadership. They waste resources saving enemies instead of destroying them." Jake had smiled and nodded politely, just like humans always did. But inside, he felt something dark stir. His ancestors had not always been peaceful. Earth's history was full of wars and battles. Humans had learned to be gentle by choice, not because they had to be. A soft beep brought Jake back to the present. His communication officer, Lieutenant Pete Wilson, looked up from his station. "Captain, we're getting strange readings from the Kepler 442 system. Energy signatures that don't match anything in our database." Jake walked over to look at the screen. The readings were definitely unusual. "Could be a new type of star activity," he said. "Or maybe an unknown alien technology. Amy will want to see this." Amy Foster appeared on the bridge a few minutes later, her eyes bright with excitement. "This is incredible, Jake. These energy patterns are artificial, but they're not from any known species. We need to investigate." Ben Clark's voice came through the communication system from the engine room. "Captain, I can get us there in 3 days if you want to check it out. The engines are running perfectly." Jake made his decision quickly. This was exactly the kind of discovery that made exploration worthwhile. Set course for Kepler 442. Let's see what's out there. The 3-day journey passed quickly. Amy spent most of her time studying the energy readings, trying to figure out what could be causing them. Ben made sure the ship was ready for anything they might find. Jake reviewed all the information they had about that part of Space when they arrived. At Kepler 442, they found something that should not have been there. Hidden behind the system's largest planet was a massive space station. It was clearly Velfani design, but it was not supposed to exist. According to all official records, this system was empty. "Jake," Amy said quietly, "I'm picking up life signs from that station. Lots of them, but something's wrong. The readings are ... strange." Jake felt a cold feeling in his stomach. Strange how? Some of the life signs are very weak, like they're sick or hurt. And I'm detecting multiple different species. Velfani, Kef, but also others, species that are supposed to be extinct. Ben's voice was tense over the communication system. Captain, that station has weapons. Big ones. And there are ship docks that could hold a small fleet. Jake stared at the hidden station. The Velfani had told everyone they were peaceful now. They said they had given up their old ways of conquest and control. But this secret base suggested something very different. Amy, can you scan for any kind of broadcast signals? Maybe we can figure out what they're doing here. Amy worked at her station for several minutes. When she looked up, her face was pale. Jake, I'm picking up some kind of research data transmission. It's heavily encrypted, but I can make out some words. They're talking about biological weapons and genetic targeting. The bridge fell silent. Biological weapons were banned by every civilized species in the galaxy. Genetic targeting meant weapons that could kill specific types of people while leaving others unharmed. There's more, Amy continued. They're mentioning test subjects, multiple species. And they're talking about something called Project Clean. Slate. Jake's hands clenched into fists. Project Clean Slate sounded like the kind of name given to something terrible. Something that involved wiping out entire groups of people. Ben, take us closer, but keep us hidden. Amy, record everything you can. If the Velfani are doing what I think they're doing, the galaxy needs to know about it. As their ship moved closer to the secret station, Jake thought about all the times humans had been called too gentle, too kind, too willing to help others. Maybe it was time for the galaxy to remember that being gentle was a choice. And when that choice was taken away, humans could become something very different, something much more dangerous than anyone expected. Commander Lisa Parker stood in the Great Hall of the Federation Council, holding a datapad that contained the most horrifying evidence she had ever seen. The massive chamber was filled with representatives from dozens of alien species, all sitting in their floating chairs arranged in a perfect circle. The humans had only 3 chairs in this room, a reminder of how little the galaxy thought of them. Lisa had spent 2 weeks preparing for this moment. After Captain Martinez and his crew discovered the secret Velfani station, human intelligence, teams had worked day and night to gather more evidence. What they found was worse than anyone could have imagined. The evidence was clear and terrible. Video recordings showed Velfani scientists conducting experiments on living beings from over 20 different species. Some of these species were supposed to be extinct, which meant the Velfani had been lying about that too. The scientists were creating biological weapons designed to target specific genetic markers. Each weapon could kill an entire species while leaving others completely unharmed. Lisa pressed a button on her datapad, and holographic images filled the center of the chamber. The alien representatives leaned forward to see better. The first image showed a laboratory where small, furry creatures were dying slowly from an injected poison. The next showed larger beings, similar to humans, but with blue skin, convulsing in pain as their bodies rejected their own blood. Honored members of the Federation Council, Lisa began, her voice steady despite the anger burning inside her. What you are seeing is evidence of war crimes being committed by the Velfani Empire. These biological weapons violate every treaty and law that our civilization is built upon. Elder Vexthul of the Velfani rose from his floating chair. He was tall and thin, with pale white skin and large black eyes. His voice was smooth and calm, as if he was discussing the weather. Commander Parker, I am afraid you have been deceived by fabricated evidence. The Velfani Empire has not engaged in such activities for over 3 centuries. Lisa played another recording. This one showed Velfani soldiers, clearly wearing official military uniforms, delivering new test subjects to the laboratory. A timestamp showed it was only 2 weeks old. This recording was taken from your own security systems, Lisa said. along with 12 hours of similar footage, all recent, all showing active biological weapons research. The Keth representative, a creature that looked like a walking machine made of silver metal, spoke next. Its voice was emotionless and mechanical. Even if these recordings are authentic, the Keth Collective sees no violation of galactic law. The species being tested are classified as inferior forms of life. Their sacrifice serves the greater good of galactic stability. Lisa felt her heart skip a beat. The Keth were not just ignoring the evidence. They were supporting it. Inferior forms of life? Lisa repeated. These are thinking, feeling beings with families and cultures and hopes for the future. How can you call them inferior? The Keth representative tilted its metal head. They lack the technological advancement and intellectual capacity of the dominant species. Logic dictates that resources should not be wasted on beings who contribute little to galactic progress. Lisa looked around the chamber. Most of the other representatives were nodding in agreement. A few looked uncomfortable, but none spoke up to support the humans. Dr. Sam Rodriguez, humanity's chief scientist, stepped forward from behind Lisa. He was a small, quiet man who rarely spoke in public, but his discoveries had saved millions of lives across the galaxy. I have analyzed the biological weapons found at the Velfani facility, he said. They have not just been targeting random species. There is a clear pattern. Sam activated his own datapad, and new images appeared in the chamber. Charts and graphs showing genetic analysis of the weapons. Every species that has been targeted for elimination has one thing in common, Sam continued. They all showed potential for rapid technological or cultural development. The Velfani have been systematically destroying any race that might one day challenge their power. Elder Vexthal laughed, a sound like breaking glass. Dr. Rodriguez, your human imagination is quite entertaining. But even if your theory were correct, what concern is it of yours? Your species is well protected under Velfani guidance. Sam's face went pale. He pressed another button on his datapad, and the final, most terrifying piece of evidence appeared in the chamber. It was a classified Velfani document, marked with their highest security codes. This document, taken from your central command, computer, lists humanity as target species 847, Sam said quietly. Scheduled for gradual elimination, once our usefulness as engineers and mediators is no longer required. The chamber fell completely silent. Even the constant humming of the air systems seemed to stop. Lisa felt something cold settle in her chest. For 200 years, humans had believed they were valued members of the galactic community. They had worked hard, shared their knowledge freely, and always tried to help others. Now they learned it had all been a lie. They were cattle, being kept alive only until they were no longer needed. This is impossible, Elder Vexthal said, but his smooth voice had developed a nervous tremor. That document is clearly fabricated. The genetic markers match perfectly with weapons designed to target human DNA, Sam replied. You have been preparing to kill us for decades. Lisa stepped forward again. I demand immediate action from this council. All biological weapons research must stop immediately. The Velfani must face justice for these crimes. And every species targeted for elimination must receive protection and reparations. The chamber erupted in discussion. Alien voices spoke in dozens of different languages, but the translation devices made their meaning clear. Most were not discussing justice or protection. They were debating whether the evidence was real, and if so, whether it mattered. After an hour of debate, the council voted. The result was devastating, but not surprising. By a vote of 38-7, with only the youngest species supporting humanity, the council decided to classify all the evidence and prohibit further human investigation. The matter is closed, announced the council speaker, an ancient being whose species had been around since before Earth had complex life. Any attempt by humans to interfere with internal Velfani affairs will be considered an act of rebellion against the Federation. Lisa stood in the center of the chamber, surrounded by aliens who had just told her that the planned genocide of her species was none of her business. She thought about her daughter back on Earth, only 10 years old, who wanted to be an explorer like her mother. She thought about all the human colonies scattered across the galaxy, trusting that the Federation would protect them. "Commander Parker," Elder Vex still said with his cold smile, "I hope you understand that humans must know their place in the galactic order. Some decisions are too important to be left to species who lack the wisdom of age and experience." Lisa looked directly into the Velthani's black eyes. When she spoke, her voice was quiet, but every being in the chamber heard her clearly. "You know what your mistake was?" she said. "You assumed that being gentle made us weak. You forgot that kindness is a choice. And you just made sure we will never choose to be kind to you again." She turned and walked out of the chamber, followed by the other human representatives. Behind them, the aliens continued their discussions, confident that they had put the humans in their proper place. They had no idea what they had just unleashed. Admiral Kate Thompson had been running a peaceful farming colony just 3 months ago. She grew vegetables and raised livestock, helping feed thousands of people on the frontier world of New Kansas. She had never fired a weapon in anger and preferred solving problems with words rather than violence. Now she stood in the command center of humanity's most secret military facility, wearing a uniform she had hoped never to put on again. The peaceful farmer was gone. In her place stood someone the galaxy had never seen before, a human military commander with unlimited authority and no patience for mercy. "Status report," Kate said to the officers gathered around the holographic display table. These were not the same humans the aliens knew. These were people who had been quietly preparing for this day for over a century. Colonel Ryan Davis stepped forward. He was young, only 35, but his eyes held the cold focus of someone who had trained his entire life for war. "All human citizens have been evacuated from Federation space. The recall order reached 98% of our people. The remaining 2% are deep cover assets who chose to stay behind." Kate nodded. The evacuation had been planned decades ago, but the aliens had never noticed. Humans were good at looking harmless while preparing for the worst. "What about our defensive positions?" "All colonies are now in full military mode," replied Captain Julia Evans, a woman who had spent 15 years pretending to be a simple trade ship captain. "The Federation thinks our merchant vessels are running away scared. They don't realize those ships are moving into attack formations." Kate smiled grimly. The galaxy was about to learn that humans had been building two of everything for the past 50 years. For every peaceful research station they showed to the aliens, there was a hidden fortress. For every simple cargo ship, there was a disguised warship. For every diplomatic agreement, there was a military contingency plan. The holographic display showed the location of every human asset in the galaxy. Red dots marked known Federation forces. Blue dots showed human positions. Most of the aliens would be shocked to see how many blue dots surrounded their most important worlds. "Tell me about the weapons," Kate said. Dr. Nancy Wells, who had spent her career helping alien species cure diseases, stepped up to the display. Her friendly bedside manner was gone, replaced by the focused intensity of a military scientist. "All biological countermeasures are ready. The Velthani weapons that target human DNA will now target Velthani DNA instead. Their own creations will destroy them." Kate felt a moment of satisfaction. The Velthani had been so proud of their genetic superiority. Soon they would discover what it felt like to be on the receiving end of species-specific genocide. "The Keth present a different challenge," Nancy continued. "Their cybernetic implants make them resistant to biological weapons, but those same implants are their weakness. Lieutenant Williams has developed a computer virus that will turn their technology against them. Lieutenant Chris Bell, one of humanity's youngest computer experts, spoke up from his station. The virus is based on human neural patterns. The Keth computers can't understand it because it doesn't follow logical rules. It learns and adapts just like a human brain, but it's designed to be completely chaotic and unpredictable. Kate approved. The Keth believed that logic and order were the highest forms of existence. Destroying them with pure chaos seemed appropriate. What about other species? Most Federation members are followers, not leaders, Ryan said. If we remove the Velfani and Keth, the others will either surrender or flee. The few species that actively supported the genocide program have been marked for special attention. Kate walked to the large window that looked out over the military base. For decades, this facility had been disguised as a simple research station. Federation inspectors had visited many times, never realizing they were standing inside one of the most advanced military complexes in the galaxy. "Admiral," said Commander Pete Wilson from the communications station, "we're receiving reports from our deep cover assets. The Federation is treating our evacuation as proof that humans are cowards. They're celebrating what they think is an easy victory." Kate turned back to her officers. "Good. Let them celebrate. It will make the shock even greater when they realize their mistake." The first target was a Velfani biological weapons facility in the Centauri system. Kate had chosen Ryan Davis to lead the assault because he understood that this was not just a military operation. It was a message to the galaxy. Ryan's team approached the facility in what appeared to be an old human cargo ship. The Velfani sensors detected the vessel, but dismissed it as harmless. Human ships were always slow and poorly armed. The facility's commander didn't even bother to raise shields. That was his last mistake. The cargo ship suddenly bristled with weapons that emerged from hidden compartments. Kinetic cannons that fired solid metal projectiles at incredible speeds. Explosive missiles that could punch through any known armor. Energy weapons that had been disguised as simple communications equipment. The Velfani had prepared their defenses against the high-tech weapons used by other Federation species. They had energy shields designed to stop laser weapons and electromagnetic barriers to disrupt missile guidance systems. They were not prepared for humans who threw chunks of metal at their targets hard enough to crack planets. Ryan's team landed on the facility within minutes. They moved through the corridors with terrifying efficiency, their primitive-looking weapons proving devastatingly effective against advanced alien technology. When Velfani guards tried to stop them with energy weapons, the humans simply walked through the beams protected by armor that looked crude but worked perfectly. The most shocking moment came when Ryan's team reached the main laboratory. Inside, they found dozens of imprisoned beings from various species, all being used as test subjects for biological weapons. The humans could have simply freed the prisoners and left. Instead, they did something that would become their signature for the rest of the war. They healed the victims first. Combat medics who had trained in alien biology worked quickly to counteract the effects of the biological weapons. Engineers who understood Velfani technology freed the prisoners from their restraints and gave them weapons. Scientists who had studied Federation databases identified each prisoner and contacted their homeworlds. By the time Ryan's team left the facility, it was not just destroyed, it was transformed into a rescue operation that saved hundreds of lives. News of the attack spread across the galaxy within hours. The Federation's response was predictable. They called the humans terrorists and criminals. They demanded immediate surrender and threatened massive retaliation. What they got instead was a second attack, then a third, then a fourth. Each assault was precisely planned and brutally executed. Human forces struck at biological weapons facilities, slave labor camps, and secret research stations that the Federation had hidden across the galaxy. But the attacks were not random. Every target had been chosen for maximum psychological impact. The humans were not just destroying Federation military assets. They were exposing decades of hidden crimes to the entire galaxy. Within 2 weeks, smaller species that had lived in fear of the Federation began to understand that someone was finally fighting back. Some sent secret messages of support to human forces. Others began their own rebellions against Federation control. The galaxy was beginning to realize that the gentle, helpful humans had been keeping secrets. They had been preparing for this war while pretending to be peaceful. They had been studying their enemies while appearing to be friends. Most terrifying of all, the humans had been choosing to be kind when they could have chosen to be something much worse. Now the choice was over, and the galaxy was about to learn what humans looked like when they stopped playing nice. General Alex Morgan had once been a kindergarten teacher. For 20 years, she had spent her days helping 5-year-old children learn to read and play nicely together. She believed in patience, kindness, and the power of education to solve problems. That was before she learned that the Galactic Federation had been planning to murder every human child in the galaxy. Now Alex stood in the war room with the human command ship, coordinating military operations across 1,000 star systems. The gentle teacher was gone, replaced by someone who understood that sometimes the only way to protect children was to become the monster that scared away other monsters. "Report," Alex said to her staff officers. "The Keth communication network is completely compromised," said Major Tom Baker, a former librarian who now specialized in information warfare. "Dr. Wells' virus has spread to 90% of their quantum relays. Their fleet commanders can't talk to each other anymore." Alex nodded with satisfaction. The Keth had built their entire civilization around perfect communication and logical coordination. Without their quantum network, they were just individual ships flying blind in the dark. "What about the Velthani biological weapons program?" "Eliminated," reported Colonel Linda Davis, who had once been a pediatric surgeon. "All 47 secret facilities have been destroyed. We recovered biological samples from each site and created countermeasures. Any Velthani who tries to use their own weapons will be destroyed by them instead." Alex felt a cold satisfaction at that news. The Velthani had spent centuries perfecting ways to commit genocide. Now their own creations would turn against them. But the most important part of the human strategy was not the technology or the weapons. It was the psychological warfare that struck at the heart of what made the Federation's members feel safe. "Status on Operation Nightmare?" Alex asked. Captain Steve Murphy, a former school principal who understood how to manage difficult children, stepped forward with a grim smile. "Working perfectly. Federation forces have no idea what we're going to do next because we're not following any logical patterns. Every time they think they understand our strategy, we do something completely different." The aliens had made a critical error in their understanding of human nature. They assumed that humans, like themselves, would follow predictable patterns based on logical goals. The Keth would always choose the most efficient solution. The Velthani would always seek to increase their power. Other species had their own predictable behaviors, but humans were different. Humans could be logical when logic served their purposes, but they could also be completely unpredictable when unpredictability was more useful. This flexibility had helped them survive on Earth, and now it was driving their enemies insane. Federation. Military commanders found themselves paralyzed by uncertainty. When they expected humans to attack military targets, the humans would instead rescue prisoners from prison camps. When the aliens prepared for rescue operations, humans would destroy weapons factories. When they anticipated sabotage, humans would launch direct assaults. When they expected direct assaults, humans would simply disappear for weeks before striking somewhere completely unexpected. The psychological pressure was destroying Federation morale faster than any weapon could have. "Give me an example of how Operation Nightmare is working." Alex said. Steve pulled up a holographic display showing a recent engagement. 3 days ago, a Velthani battle fleet cornered one of our ships near the Vega system. They had overwhelming firepower and numerical superiority. Any logical species would have either surrendered or fought to the death. Alex watched the tactical display show the Velthani ships closing in on the lone human vessel. Instead, our ship broadcast a surrender signal, then immediately launched every escape pod it had. The Velthani, thinking they had won an easy victory, moved in to capture the ship and prisoners. The display showed the Velthani vessels approaching the human ship and beginning to recover the escape pods. What they didn't know was that each escape pod contained a human volunteer and enough explosives to cripple a battleship. When the Velthani brought the pods aboard their ships, our people detonated the charges. 7 Velthani vessels were destroyed from the inside. Alex smiled grimly. And the psychological impact? Devastating. Now every Federation commander is terrified of human surrender signals. They don't know if they're facing a real defeat or a trap. Some are so paranoid they're shooting human escape pods on sight, which makes them look like monsters to their own people. This was exactly what Alex had hoped for. The Federation had maintained power by convincing smaller species that they were the good guys fighting for order and civilization. When Federation forces started shooting helpless refugees, that image began to crumble. What about our own casualties? Colonel Davis stepped forward with a report that would have horrified the old Alex, the kindergarten teacher who cried when her students got hurt. We've lost 43 ships and over 2,000 personnel, but each loss has been strategically planned. Every human who died took dozens of Federation troops with them and achieved a specific military objective. The new Alex, the general, who had accepted that sometimes good people had to do terrible things to protect children, simply nodded. Acceptable losses. Continue operations. Dr. Nancy Wells entered the war room carrying a datapad with the latest intelligence reports. Alex, we've discovered something important about the Federation's genocide program. It's bigger than we thought. Alex turned to her old friend. Nancy had once helped her treat sick children at their colony's medical center. Now she was humanity's chief weapons designer. How much bigger? They've been manipulating human development for over a century, Nancy said. Subtle influences on our culture, our technology, even our genetics. They wanted to keep us useful, but not dangerous. Every peaceful choice we made was partially because they were secretly guiding us toward pacifism. Alex felt rage boil up inside her chest. They were controlling us? Not directly, but yes. They influenced our education systems to emphasize cooperation over competition. They guided our technology development away from military applications. They even affected our entertainment media to promote peaceful values. The implications were staggering. For generations, humans had believed they were choosing to be gentle and helpful. Now they learned that their peaceful nature had been artificially enhanced by aliens who wanted to keep them harmless. There's more, Nancy continued. We found records of other species that received similar treatment. The Federation has been doing this for thousands of years. Every potentially dangerous race gets the same manipulation. Those who resist are eliminated. Those who submit become useful servants. Alex stared at the datapad, understanding finally dawning on her. We're not just fighting for our survival. We're fighting for our free will. Exactly. And that means we can't hold back anymore. Every ethical restraint we've been following was programmed into us by our enemies. The real human nature, the one that conquered Earth and survived ice ages and built civilizations, is much more dangerous than anyone imagined. Alex looked around the war room at her officers. These people had all been teachers, doctors, farmers, and artists before the war began. They had been gentle, because they chose to be gentle. Now they learned that choice had been influenced by aliens who wanted to control them. New orders, Alex said. Remove all ethical restrictions on our operations. No more surgical strikes. No more attempts to minimize civilian casualties among Federation species. They want to see what humans look like when we're not playing nice. Show them. Colonel Davis looked uncomfortable. Alex, are you sure? Once we cross that line, there's no going back. Alex thought about her kindergarten students, about all the human children across the galaxy who would never grow up if the Federation won this war. She thought about the aliens who had spent decades manipulating human minds to keep them docile and harmless. Linda, they were never going to let us go back. They were planning to kill every human in the galaxy once we stopped being useful. The only choice we have is between being their victims or being their nightmare. She turned to address all her officers. Send a message to every human commander in the galaxy. The gloves are off. We're not the Federation's helpful servants anymore. We're not their controllable pets. We're apex predators who have been pretending to be herbivores for 2 centuries. Alex walked to the window that looked out at the stars, thinking about the galaxy that had raised her species like livestock while planning their slaughter. It's time to remind the universe what humans were like before we learned to be civilized. And this time, we have technology that our ancestors could never have dreamed of. The war was about to become something much worse than anyone had imagined. The humans were about to stop being the galaxy's protectors and become its worst nightmare. President Helen Carter stood in what had once been the grand chamber of the Federation Council. The floating chairs were gone, smashed to pieces during the final battle for the capital world. The walls were scarred by weapons fire, and half the ceiling had collapsed. But the Great Hall was still functional, and it would serve perfectly for what Helen needed to do today. Helen had been a small-town mayor before the war, known for organizing community festivals and helping neighbors resolve disputes over property lines. She had never wanted to be president of anything larger than her town of 3,000 people. But when humanity needed someone to speak for them to the galaxy, they had chosen her because she understood how to bring people together rather than tear them apart. Today, she would speak to the survivors of a war that had lasted only 6 months, but had changed the galaxy forever. The assembled beings in the hall represented what remained of the old Federation. Some species had fought alongside the Valfani and Keth until the bitter end. Others had surrendered early, hoping for mercy. A few had switched sides during the fighting, helping humans locate hidden Federation bases and weapon stockpiles. Helen looked out at the crowd of aliens, many of whom appeared nervous or frightened. They had good reason to be scared. For the first time in thousands of years, they were facing consequences for their actions. Representatives of the former Galactic Federation, Helen began, her voice carrying clearly through the damaged chamber. 6 months ago, your leaders made a decision that changed everything. They chose to reveal that they had been planning genocide against my species and others. They chose to treat mercy as weakness and kindness as stupidity. A few of the aliens shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Helen's tone was calm and reasonable, the same voice she had used to mediate disputes between farmers. But everyone in the room understood that they were listening to someone who now controlled the most powerful military force in the galaxy. Today, I want to make something very clear to all of you. The age of empires built on fear and oppression is over. The galaxy will never again be ruled by species who believe that might makes right. Elder Vex Thul, the Velfani leader who had dismissed human concerns just months earlier, raised one of his forearms. He looked much older now, his pale skin marked with stress lines and his black eyes dull with defeat. President Carter, he said in a voice that no longer held its old arrogance, the Velfani Empire accepts your victory. We are prepared to discuss terms of surrender, Helen looked at him for a long moment. Elder Vexthul, you still don't understand. This is not about surrender. This is about justice. She activated a holographic display that filled the center of the chamber. Images appeared showing the biological weapons facilities that human forces had discovered and destroyed. Pictures of test subjects, many of them children, who had suffered and died in Velfani laboratories. Your species spent centuries perfecting ways to commit genocide. You developed weapons specifically designed to murder entire races while leaving others unharmed. You tested these weapons on living beings, including children. The images changed to show documents recovered from Velfani computers. Lists of species marked for elimination, detailed plans for mass extermination, timeline charts showing when different races would be wiped out. You didn't just plan to kill my people. You planned to eliminate any species that might someday challenge your power. 47 different races were on your extermination list, including several that you had already driven to near extinction. Helen paused, letting the weight of those words settle over the chamber. So no, Elder Vexthul, we will not be discussing terms. We will be implementing justice. Colonel Steve Murphy, the former school principal who now oversaw reconstruction, efforts stepped forward with a thick folder of documents. The Velfani species is hereby placed under indefinite occupation, Steve announced. Your government is dissolved. Your military is disbanded. Your weapons of mass destruction are confiscated. Your homeworld and all colonies will be administered by human governors until such time as your species demonstrates that it can exist peacefully with others. Vexthul's skin turned even paler. You cannot simply occupy entire species. The other races will never accept such extreme measures. Helen smiled, but it was not a friendly expression. Elder, you seem to be under the impression that the other races have a choice in this matter. She turned to address the Keth representative, a mechanical being whose silver surface was now scarred and dented from battle damage. The Keth Collective presents a different problem, Helen continued. Your species believed that logic justified genocide. You supported the extermination of inferior species because you thought it was efficient. The Keth representative's mechanical voice was flat and emotionless. Our calculations indicated that limited resources should be allocated to species with the highest probability of contributing to galactic advancement. Helen nodded. I understand your logic, which is why humanity has calculated that the galaxy would be more efficient without the Keth Collective. The mechanical being's head tilted in confusion. That conclusion is illogical. The Keth possess superior technology and intellectual capacity. Do you? Helen asked. Because from where? Stand. It looks like your superior technology was easily defeated by humans using crude kinetic weapons and computer viruses. Your intellectual capacity failed to predict that peaceful species might have hidden military capabilities. Your logic led you to support genocide, which turned out to be a strategic error that cost you everything. Dr. Nancy Wells stepped forward. With her own data pad, the Keth cybernetic network will be permanently dismantled. Your species will be forbidden from developing artificial intelligence or quantum communication systems. Individual Keth may continue to exist, but the collective as a unified entity is terminated. Helen watched as the implications sank in among the assembled aliens. The two most powerful species in the galaxy had just been effectively destroyed. As political entities, the Velfani would exist as an occupied territory under human control. The Keth would exist as individuals without the collective intelligence that had made them dangerous. Now, Helen said, turning to address the representatives of smaller species, let's discuss the future of the galaxy. An alien that looked like a large, furry bear raised its paw nervously. President Carter, what will happen to those of us who did not participate in the genocide programs? Helen's expression softened slightly. That depends entirely on your species' actions during the war. Those who helped human forces or provided aid to genocide victims will be treated as allies. Those who remain neutral will be given opportunities to prove their commitment to peaceful coexistence. She paused, her voice becoming harder again. Those who actively supported genocide will face consequences appropriate to their crimes. Captain Jake Martinez, the explorer who had first discovered the Valfani secret facility, entered the chamber carrying another set of documents. His peaceful exploration days were over, but he had adapted to his new role as humanity's chief, investigator of war crimes. We have compiled a complete record of every species' actions during the genocide programs, Jake announced. 12 species provided direct military support to the Valfani and Keth. 18 species supplied resources or intelligence. 6 species helped capture test subjects for the biological weapons experiments. Helen took the documents and looked out at the assembled representatives. Some of them were clearly terrified, recognizing that their species were among those listed. Each species that participated in genocide will provide reparations to the victims, Helen continued. This will include technology transfers, resource payments, and labor contributions to help rebuild destroyed civilizations. A small insect-like alien stood up on 6 legs. President Carter, some of our species were forced to cooperate under threat of destruction. We had no choice. Helen considered this. I understand that some of you were coerced. That will be taken into account. But you must understand something important about humans. We believe that there is always a choice. You could have chosen to resist, even if it meant destruction. Some species did make that choice, and they died fighting rather than participating in genocide. She gestured to an empty section of the chamber. Those species are no longer here to speak for themselves, because they chose death over complicity. We honor their sacrifice by assuring that the species who chose collaboration face consequences for that choice. Colonel Ryan Davis, the young officer who had led many of the assault missions, stepped forward with the final set of documents. The new galactic order will be based on principles that humanity has learned through trial and error, Ryan announced. No single species will be permitted to dominate others. No government will be allowed to develop weapons of mass destruction. Any attempt to resurrect the old imperial system will be met with immediate human intervention. Helen walked to the center of the chamber, standing where the old Federation symbol had once been displayed. In its place was a simple plaque that read, "Never again," in dozens of different languages. Some of you are wondering what gives humanity the right to impose our will on the galaxy, Helen said. The answer is simple. We have the right because we have the power, and we gained that power by defeating